Tobias Quill had learned 4 important truths during his 17 years as a structural habitat technician. First, that gravity stabilizers only malfunction during important presentations. Second, that synthetic silk was magnetically attracted to grease. Third, that rental formalwear was engineered by sadists with a personal vendetta against breathing. And fourth, that if something improbable was going to happen in a crowded room, it would happen to him. All 4 truths were currently holding hands and dancing. He stood beneath the prismatic vault of the high court of Aurelium Spire, tugging at a collar that appeared to have been calibrated for someone with fewer lungs. The Interstellar Concorde's renewal summit had transformed the palace into a cross between a diplomatic council and the galaxy's most expensive buffet. Delegates from 52 systems shimmered, floated, hovered, and exhaled across the chamber. The Vorthi Combine required helium-rich air and drifted in translucent environmental cocoons like thoughtful balloons. The amphibious envoy from Pelagius Crescent wore a shoulder-mounted mist unit that emitted polite hissing noises every time she gestured. 3 members of the Triune Chorus Guild were arguing with themselves in perfectly harmonized counterpoint about seating arrangements, and Tobias representing humanity because his firm had won the palace's structural reinforcement contract, and his supervisor had declared, "You're the least likely to insult royalty accidentally," was attempting to merge visually with a decorative pillar. The pillar appeared to be made of crystallized starlight. It pulsed in slow waves of gold and violet, cycling patterns that probably meant something profound in Aureli culture. To Tobias, it resembled the buffering symbol on his diagnostic slate. The Aureli themselves moved like gravity had signed a non-aggression pact with them. Tall, luminous-skinned, humanoid mostly. Their most striking features swept back from their temples and elegant arcs, elongated auricular crests that could pivot independently. Tobias had watched a court minister track 4 separate conversations at once, each crest angling toward a different speaker like organic satellite dishes. At the center of it all sat Sovereign Elendra Kale upon a throne that looked carved from a single luminous geode. Her hair shimmered silver blue, cascading like frostlit silk. Her eyes held the deep amber of ancient resin. Authority settled on her shoulders as naturally as air. Beside her stood Princess Eris. Eris was small, solemn, and visibly imprisoned by ceremonial robes that seemed designed by someone who had never met a child. Her dark hair contrasted sharply with her mother's luminous silver, and her delicate crests twitched with restless energy. Tobias recognized that expression. That was the look of someone enduring a speech about tariffs. Ambassador Kelroth of the Meridian Trade Assembly had been speaking for 21 minutes about cross-sector docking levies. Tobias had discovered that if he mentally recalculated the stress tolerances of Aurelium Spire's vaulted arches accounting for varied gravities among species, he could appear attentive while doing something useful. He was midway through estimating resonance dampening requirements when Princess Eris froze. Her crests snapped forward with the focus of a targeting array, and she looked directly at him through at least 200 dignitaries. Then she ran. Not walked, not glided with royal decorum, ran. Gasps rippled outward. Conversations died mid-syllable. The Triune Chorus Guild fell out of harmony for the first time in recorded history. Tobias had exactly 2 seconds to wonder if he had accidentally violated an obscure court etiquette rule before Eris collided with him at full velocity. Small arms wrapped around his waist. "It's you," she announced to the entire galaxy. "It's the funny maintenance man." The silence that followed could have supported structural beams. Tobias stared down at the small royal attached to him like a delighted barnacle. 3 weeks ago. Public transit concourse, midday break between structural inspections. A lost child by a kinetic sculpture fountain, crying. He had sat nearby, kept a polite distance, and told stories. Not heroic stories. Stories about the time he accidentally recalibrated a gravity well and pinned himself to a ceiling for 12 humiliating minutes. The incident where he routed coolant through a beverage dispenser and invented the galaxy's coldest tea. He had kept talking until she laughed. He had stayed until security arrived. He had not known she was royalty. Sovereign Elendra rose. It was not a dramatic movement. It was controlled, measured. Far more terrifying. "Technician Quill," she said, not a question. He bowed awkwardly while being hugged by her daughter, achieving something between a nod and a mild wobble. "You will accompany us," Alendra said, immediately. The private chamber felt more dangerous than the throne hall because it contained fewer witnesses. Eris climbed into Tobias's lap as though it had always been hers. "Explain," Alendra said. Tobias did. He recounted the fountain, the crying, the terrible gravity anecdote, the coolant tea. "You did not recognize her," Alendra observed. "I don't generally assume sobbing children are heads of state," Tobias said, then wished he hadn't. A flicker touched her mouth. "For 3 weeks," Alendra continued, "she has asked when the kind engineer with the tragic collar choices would visit." Tobias glanced down. "This caller is actively hostile." Eris giggled. Something in the sovereign's expression shifted. "Most who encounter royalty see opportunity," Alendra said quietly. "You saw a frightened child and told her about being stuck to ceilings." "I do excellent ceilings," Tobias offered. Silence. "Then you will remain," Alendra decided, "as on-site structural advisor, resident." Tobias blinked. "Live here," he squeaked. Eris beamed. "Yes," Alendra said. "She has adopted you. I am choosing not to contest the decision." The guest wing was larger than his previous 3 apartments combined. 2 weeks later, Princess Eris discovered maintenance shafts. "How did you find me?" Tobias asked as her face appeared upside down in a service hatch. "I listened," she said proudly. Of course she had. He taught her about load distribution using fruit bowls, about atmospheric layering using soup, about why methane and oxygen should not be roommates. "Because explosions," she announced to a horrified tutor later. "Very educational explosions." Lord Chancellor Valor summoned Tobias. "In 14 days, Valor said dryly, "the princess has skipped 3 philosophy lectures, asked if battlements could be reinforced for fun, and informed the council she intends to pursue structural engineering." Tobias blinked. "That's bad?" Valor studied him. "She laughs now," the Chancellor said quietly. "She did not laugh before." The emergency alarm came at night. Not routine, not maintenance. Catastrophic breach, Tobias did not think. He accessed palace systems from his quarters. Thermal fluctuations in eastern substructures, unauthorized bypass in structural sensor grids, hostiles moving through service corridors. Valor's face appeared on his calm. "They are using infrastructure routes," the Chancellor said tightly. "They know our layouts." "I know them better," Tobias replied. He rerouted gravity in select corridors, just enough to make footing miserable. He shifted temperature gradients. He introduced harmless but blinding particulate bursts. Not lethal, just inconvenient. Then he did something unquestionably foolish. "I can reach Eris faster than security," he said. "You are not military," Valor snapped. "I am stubborn," Tobias countered. He dove into the tunnels. Pressure changes popped his ears. Artificial gravity fluctuated. He emerged outside Eris's chamber as guards swung weapons toward him. "Did you make the floors tilt?" Eris demanded as the door opened. "Because that was amazing." "Yes," he said, grabbing her hand. "Adventure time." They moved through forgotten shafts. She listened for distant movement he couldn't hear. He adjusted routes accordingly. They reached the secure hall just as security teams cornered the intruders in a section Tobias had intentionally turned into a nauseating gravity spiral. Alendra dropped to her knees and pulled Eris close. Then she looked at Tobias. Relief, fury, gratitude, all at once. "We will discuss your decision to run toward danger," she said. "I assumed I'd be in trouble," he admitted. Later, in private, she spoke more softly. "They targeted her," Alendra said, "because she represents cooperation between species, because she trusts you." "I understand," Tobias said. "If that makes me a liability." "Stop," Alendra interrupted. "You manipulated half my palace's physics to protect my daughter. You navigated infrastructure no one else comprehends, and you kept her calm." She stepped closer. "Stay," she said. "Not 6 months. Stay." He swallowed. "Are you certain?" "No," she said honestly, but she was certain when she ran to you. 6 months later, another summit. Eris no longer ran across the hall. She waved, dignified, mostly. Tobias wore clothing that fit. Aurelium Spire stood stronger than ever, structurally reinforced, security upgraded, gravity systems optimized. After dinner, Eris enthusiastically described a new structural compression formula she had derived. It only collapsed twice, she said proudly. Educational collapses, Tobias clarified. Later, on the balcony overlooking bioluminescent gardens, Alendra leaned into him. She told me today that running to you was the bravest thing she has ever done, Alendra said softly. She was 6, Tobias replied. She was right, Alendra said. Inside, Eris shouted that she had recalculated load tolerances and required immediate verification because it was extremely dramatic. Tobias sighed. Duty calls. It always does, Alendra said, smiling. He had arrived to fix stress fractures in stone. Instead, he had reinforced something far more fragile and far more important. He followed the sound of excited royal engineering and the small voice that had once cut through a silent throne room and decided quite publicly that the galaxy's most underdressed technician was worth running toward.